Mafia boss hears his black maid singing at night. When he enters, he uncovers a secret that shocks him. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. As the moon hung high in the sky, casting a pale light over the mansion, the only sound that could be heard was the soft hum of a gentle melody. It was an unlikely tune, one that echoed through the halls of the mansion, winding its way around the polished marble floors and high, arched ceilings. Inside the large, opulent home, something unusual was happening. The mansion, usually silent at night, was filled with the soothing voice of the maid who worked tirelessly for the Mafia boss. Emma, the maid, stood in her small room at the back of the house, the only space in this grand estate that truly felt like hers. The room was sparse, a bed tucked in one corner, a small desk, and a simple window through which the moonlight shone. But it was here, in this modest space, where Emma allowed herself a rare moment of peace. The melody she sang was not just a song. It was a release, a way to push back the deep ache that lingered in her heart. A song she sang to remind herself of who she was before this life, before the dark power of the Mafia had claimed her. She never sang aloud, not in front of anyone, but tonight was different. Tonight, the loneliness weighed heavier than usual, and she needed to sing to remind herself that she still had a soul beneath the uniform, beneath the hard work. But as she stood by the window, her eyes closed, and her voice carrying the weight of a lifetime of sorrow, she did not realize that she was being watched. Her singing had not gone unnoticed. Just down the hall, the Mafia boss, Dominic had been pacing in his office, trying to unwind after a long day of business meetings and family matters. It had been a grueling week, one filled with tension and whispers of betrayal. But in the quiet of the night, as he stood by the door to his office, he heard something that stopped him in his tracks. It was soft at first, almost unnoticeable, but as the seconds passed, the melody grew clearer. His ears pricked as he recognized the voice. Emma, the maid, was singing. He had never heard her sing before. In all the time she had worked in the mansion, she had always been quiet, invisible, just another part of the staff. He had no idea that she had a voice so beautiful, so full of emotion. For a moment, he just stood there, listening, as her voice filled the empty hallway. The sound was raw, unpolished, but it carried a depth of feeling that made his heart ache. It was a voice full of pain, of longing, yet also of strength. As the song continued, he found himself drawn closer. He told himself it was just curiosity, nothing more. But as he moved silently down the hall toward her room, he couldn't help but feel a strange pull. The door was slightly ajar, and as he peered inside, he saw her standing by the window, her back to him, completely unaware of his presence. She sang with her whole heart, her body swaying slightly to the rhythm, lost in the music. Dominic stood frozen for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never seen her like this before. She was always so composed, so professional, so distant. But here she was, vulnerable and unguarded, her soul laid bare in the quiet of the night. He felt something stir within him, something unfamiliar. It was not just admiration for her voice, but a deeper connection he couldn't quite explain. His eyes softened as he watched her. He didn't know why, but something about her singing stirred a memory, a painful memory he had long buried deep within himself. Without thinking, he pushed the door open slowly, stepping into the room. The sound of the door creaking caused Emma to stop mid-song. She turned quickly, her eyes wide with shock as she saw him standing there. Mr. Valente, she stammered, her face flushing with embarrassment. Dominic remained silent for a moment, his eyes not leaving hers. He had never seen her so exposed before, so raw. And it was as if he had discovered a part of her no one else had ever seen. Emma. He finally spoke, his voice low and steady. I didn't know you could sing. She looked down, avoiding his gaze, clearly flustered. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disturb you, sir. He shook his head, stepping closer to her. No, you didn't disturb me, he said, his voice softer now. I've never heard you sing before. Emma swallowed hard, trying to collect herself. It's just something I do sometimes. To cope. Dominic's expression softened. What are you coping with? He asked, his voice gentle. She hesitated for a moment, unsure of how much she could share with him, a man she barely knew. But there was something in his gaze, something that made her feel safe, as if he wouldn't judge her. She took a deep breath. I sing to remind myself of who I am, she said quietly. Before all of this, before I became just another maid in this mansion. Dominic was silent for a moment, processing her words. He had never thought about Emma's life outside of the walls of the mansion. He had always seen her as just another worker, another face in the crowd of employees. But now, as he stood there, listening to her, he realized just how little he really knew about her. And in that moment, something shifted within him. He wasn't sure what it was, but he knew that he couldn't just let this moment slip away. Emma was not just a maid. She was someone with a story, someone who had a life and a heart, just like anyone else. And he was about to uncover a secret that would change everything. I had never imagined that a simple moment like this could change the course of everything. Standing in the dim light of the hallway, I felt the weight of Dominic Valente's gaze on me, like something I couldn't escape. His presence was almost suffocating, and for the first time since I had started working in his mansion, I felt exposed, vulnerable. But his voice, low and steady, pierced the tension that hung in the air between us. What are you coping with? He asked softly, his eyes never leaving mine. I had spent so long hiding my struggles, burying them beneath a professional mask, but in that moment, the walls I had built around myself began to crumble. I sing to remind myself of who I am. I whispered, feeling the words slip out of me before I could stop them. Before all of this, before I became just another maid in this mansion. Dominic's expression softened, his lips pressing into a thin line as he studied me. He didn't speak at first, and I wondered if he understood what I meant. I couldn't tell him everything. How could I? The story of my past was too painful, too complex to share with someone like him, someone who lived in a world of power and control. But in that moment, he wasn't just the boss of this mansion. He was a man, standing before me, hearing my pain, and for reasons I couldn't fully comprehend, I felt like I could trust him. You're not just a maid, he finally said, his voice quieter now. You're more than that. His words hung in the air, and I felt a strange warmth spread through me, a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time. It was kindness, something I thought I had lost along the way. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. I didn't know what to say. Dominic stepped closer to me, his eyes never leaving mine, and I felt my heart race in my chest. You've been through a lot, haven't you? He said softly, as if he were speaking to himself. I nodded, unable to find my voice. He reached out, just inches away from me, and for a moment, I thought he might touch me, but he didn't. He just stood there, close enough that I could feel the heat of his presence, and his eyes softened, almost like he was seeing me for the first time. Why don't you take a break? He said, his voice still gentle. You deserve it. His words were unexpected, and I felt a rush of emotions. I wasn't used to being treated with kindness, certainly not by someone like him. I was just a maid, a worker, invisible to most people in this house, but not to him. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. Thank you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Dominic nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips, before he turned and walked away. As he disappeared down the hallway, I stood there, frozen, unable to move. What had just happened? For a brief moment, I had seen a side of him that I never thought existed. The cold, powerful Mafia boss was still there, but something else had emerged. Something softer. Something human. I couldn't explain it, but I felt like everything had shifted. The world around me suddenly felt different, as if I were seeing it through new eyes. I was no longer just a maid in his house. I had become someone he saw, someone he acknowledged. And in that moment, I realized that this was just the beginning. I wasn't sure where this would lead, or what would happen next, but something told me that my life in this mansion, in this world of power and darkness, was about to change forever. I stood there in the quiet of the hallway, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Dominic Valente, the man who ruled over this mansion and commanded fear in everyone around him, had shown me kindness. A simple, unexpected kindness that made everything feel different. I had always seen him as an untouchable figure, a man above everyone else, cold and distant. But now, after that brief exchange, I saw something else in him. Something real. Something human. I took a deep breath and tried to steady my racing heart. What had I expected from him? A reprimand for singing out of turn? A dismissal like every other time I had stepped out of line? But no. Instead, he had seen me. Truly seen me. I wasn't sure how to feel about it. I wasn't used to being seen. Not by someone like him. But there was more to it. There was something I hadn't told him. Something buried deep inside that made me hesitant to speak. For years, I had built walls around myself. Walls to protect me from the pain of loss. Pain that was still fresh, even though it had been years since I had lost everything. My family. My future. My life as I knew it. When Dominic had walked away, I stood there, unable to move. My mind raced with the weight of the emotions that had been triggered. I wasn't just a maid in this mansion. Not anymore. I didn't know how much of this moment I could share with him, but I knew one thing for certain. My life here, in this gilded cage, was never going to be the same again. The following days felt like a blur. I continued my work in the mansion, doing my best to keep my head down, to remain invisible, but it was hard. Every time I passed Dominic in the hallway or in the vast, ornate dining room, I felt his eyes on me. They weren't the cold, indifferent eyes of the Mafia boss I was used to. No, they were something different. There was a curiosity there, a softness, like he was trying to figure me out. It made me uneasy, but also strangely seen. I couldn't get the image of him standing in my room, watching me sing, out of my head. It was as though everything had changed in that one moment. I had seen a side of him no one else had. The powerful, ruthless man had been replaced by someone who seemed vulnerable. I was sure it was just my imagination, or perhaps it was a trick of the mind. After all, he was still the same man who ran a criminal empire with an iron fist. But even so, something had shifted. A few days later, as I was walking down the hallway to the kitchen, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, half expecting to see one of the other staff members, but instead, it was Dominic. His tall figure loomed in the doorway, and I felt a lump form in my throat. He was looking at me in that way again, as though he could read every emotion I was trying to hide. "Emma," he said, his voice steady but softer than usual. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" My heart skipped a beat. I nodded, unsure of what to expect. He gestured for me to follow him, and we walked to the far end of the mansion, away from the eyes of the other staff members. The space was quiet, far from the bustling parts of the house. "You don't need to worry," he said, his voice lower now, almost like he was speaking confidentially. "I'm not here to reprimand you. I just wanted to check on you." The words hit me like a sudden wave, and I felt my breath catch. "Check on me." I repeated, not sure. I understood. "Yes," he said, his expression unreadable. "You've been different lately. I've noticed." I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to explain the emotions that had been swirling inside me ever since that night. I had spent my whole life running from my past, trying to bury it deep inside. But now, standing in front of him, I realized I couldn't keep running forever. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. Dominic studied me for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly as if he was trying to figure me out. "I don't expect you to share anything you're not ready to," he said softly. "But if you ever need to talk, I'm here." His words were unexpected, and they caught me off guard. No one had ever spoken to me like this, especially not someone of his stature. The walls I had built around myself for so long began to crack. But I still wasn't sure if I could trust him. Could I really open up to him? Could I let him in? "Thank you," I whispered, unsure of what else to say. He gave me a small nod, as if he understood that I wasn't ready to share everything just yet. "I'm just saying. If you ever need help, you don't have to do it alone." He turned to leave, but paused at the door. "And Emma," he added, his voice lower now, almost like a secret. "You matter. Don't ever forget that." With that, he walked away, leaving me standing in the silence of the hallway. I didn't know what to think. But one thing was clear. Dominic Valente had just shown me a side of him I never thought I would see. And now, I wasn't sure where my life was headed, but I knew it was no longer the same path I had been walking before. I had never imagined that something as simple as a conversation could leave me feeling so exposed. The words Dominic had said lingered in my mind long after he had walked away. "You matter. Don't ever forget that." It wasn't just the kindness in his voice, but the way he said it, like he truly meant it. It was unlike anything I had ever heard before, especially from someone like him. I had spent so many years being invisible to the world, burying my emotions beneath a facade of professionalism and duty. But now, with every passing day, the walls around my heart seemed to crumble just a little more. I wasn't used to this feeling of being seen, of being noticed. It made me uneasy, but it also made me feel something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. I continued with my work in the mansion, doing everything I could to remain invisible. But no matter how hard I tried, I could feel Dominic's gaze on me, watching me from the shadows. I had grown accustomed to the eyes of those who lived in this world of power, but his eyes were different. There was something in them that unsettled me, yet it also intrigued me. One evening, as I was cleaning the dining room, I saw him again. Dominic walked in, his footsteps silent against the marble floor. He was dressed in a tailored suit, his expression unreadable. He always carried himself with an air of authority, but there was something in his demeanor that night that made me feel like he was unsure, like he wasn't just the Mafia boss, but a man with something on his mind. He approached me, his eyes meeting mine for the briefest moment before he looked away. "Emma," he said, his voice calm, but with a hint of something I couldn't quite place. "I need to talk to you about something." My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't sure what he wanted to discuss, but the way he said it made me nervous. "Of course, sir," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. He gestured for me to follow him, and we walked in silence through the large hallway, away from the main areas of the mansion. We stopped in a small sitting room, and he motioned for me to sit. I hesitated for a moment before I sat down, unsure of what was coming next. "I've been thinking about what you said," Dominic began, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. "About your past. About what you're going through." His words caught me off guard. I hadn't expected him to bring up our previous conversation. I had been careful to keep my distance, to keep my emotions buried, but it seemed like he had noticed. "I don't know if you've noticed, but things here have changed," he continued, his eyes searching mine. "I'm not just talking about the business. I'm talking about everything. About how people are treated." I stayed silent, not sure what to say. I wasn't sure how to respond to his words. I had always seen Dominic as a man of power, someone who ruled with an iron fist. But now, as I sat across from him, I saw something different in him. There was a vulnerability there, something raw that I hadn't noticed before. "I know you've been through a lot," he said, his tone still soft. "And I want you to know that you don't have to go through it alone." I stared at him, unsure of how to process what he was saying. This was the man who had built an empire on fear and control, the man who had made countless decisions that had affected the lives of many. And yet, here he was, offering me something I never thought I would hear: empathy. "You don't have to stay in the background," he added. "You're more than just a maid in this house. You deserve more than that." His words took me by surprise, and for the first time since I started working here, I felt a flicker of something inside me. Something I couldn't quite name, but something that made my heart beat a little faster. "I've been thinking about offering you a different role," he continued, his eyes never leaving mine. "One where you're not just someone who cleans and serves, but someone who is valued for more than just what they can do." My mind raced, trying to process what he was saying. I had never imagined that Dominic Valente, of all people, would offer me anything more than my current position in the mansion. I had always been invisible to him, just another face among the staff. But now, he was offering me a chance at something more, something that could change everything. "What do you think?" he asked, his voice still calm, but carrying an undercurrent of something else. Hope? Concern? I wasn't sure. But whatever it was, it made me feel like I had a choice. A choice I had never had before. I don't know what to say," I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. Dominic nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You don't have to decide right now. Take your time. But know that the offer is there. You deserve more than what you've been given." I sat there in silence, my mind racing with a million thoughts. What did this mean? What was he offering me, really? Was it just a gesture of kindness, or was there something more behind it? I wasn't sure, but I knew one thing for certain. This was a turning point. I had spent so long in this mansion, hiding behind the walls I had built around myself. But now, for the first time, I felt like I had a chance to change everything. The question was, could I take that chance? Would I be able to accept it? I didn't know. But one thing was clear: my life was no longer just about serving the Mafia boss. It was about something more. Something I was only beginning to understand. I stood there, the weight of Dominic's words still pressing heavily on my chest. The offer he made had caught me off guard, but it also stirred something deep inside me. For the first time since I started working in the mansion, I felt like I wasn't just a maid, like I could be something more. Something real. I had been carrying the weight of my past for so long, keeping everything buried beneath a cold, professional exterior. But now, the walls I had carefully constructed began to crumble, and for a moment, I felt exposed. I was no longer just a servant in the shadows. I could feel it. The shift, the change in the way Dominic saw me. It was subtle, but it was there. I wasn't sure what to make of it. Was it just a moment of kindness, or was he offering me something more? Something deeper? I couldn't tell. But I had spent too many years feeling invisible, too many years being overlooked and underestimated. The thought that I could be seen, that I could have a place beyond just being a maid, felt like a dream. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I wanted to take the chance. I wasn't sure what it would mean for me, or for Dominic, but I knew I couldn't stay in the shadows forever. The next few days were a blur. I tried to keep my focus on my work, as usual, but every time I passed Dominic in the hall or caught his gaze across the room, something shifted in me. The connection between us, however unspoken, seemed to grow stronger. I found myself thinking about him in a way I hadn't before. Not just as the Mafia boss I had served, but as a man. A man who saw something in me I didn't even see in myself. One evening, as I was cleaning the grand dining room, Dominic approached me again. I could feel his presence before I saw him, like a heavy force in the air. He stood silently for a moment, watching me work, and I couldn't help but feel the tension build. I didn't know what to expect this time. "Emma," he said, his voice calm, yet there was something different in it, something that made my heart race. "I've been thinking more about our conversation." I turned to face him, my pulse quickening. I couldn't look away. "I've decided I want to offer you that role," he continued, his voice steady. "But it's not just about work. I think you deserve more than just a job. You deserve to have a choice. A real choice in your life." His words felt like a breath of fresh air, but at the same time, they were overwhelming. "I don't know what to say," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to say anything yet," he replied. "But I want you to know that you don't have to stay in the background anymore. You don't have to live a life of silence and invisibility. You can choose something different." His eyes were searching mine, and for a moment, I wondered if he saw all of me. The parts one had kept hidden, the parts one had buried so deeply inside. It felt like he understood, like he saw beyond the walls I had built. I was speechless, unsure of how to respond. The offer was too big, too different from everything I had known. But at the same time, it was everything I had ever wanted. For so long, I had kept myself small, kept my dreams locked away, afraid of what might happen if I let myself hope. But now, with Dominic standing in front of me, offering me a chance at something more, I felt like I could finally take that step. I don't know if I'm ready," I said, my voice trembling. "I've spent so long being invisible. I'm not sure how to be anything else." Dominic stepped closer, his expression softening. "You don't have to do it alone," he said quietly. "I'll be here to help you. You just have to take the first step." I felt a lump form in my throat as I looked at him. It was hard to believe, to let myself trust him after everything. But something in his eyes made me feel like I could. For the first time, I wasn't just a servant in his house. I was a person. I was seen. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice barely audible. He nodded, his lips curving into a small smile. "Take your time," he said. "But when you're ready, I'm here." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, the weight of his words lingering in the air. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. I had a choice now, a choice I had never had before. The thought of stepping into something unknown, of embracing the opportunity he was offering, was terrifying, but it was also thrilling. For the first time, I felt like I had control over my life, over my future. And that was a feeling I had long since forgotten. I wasn't sure what would happen next, or what Dominic's offer really meant. But I knew one thing. I was no longer invisible. And I was ready to step out of the shadows. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything had shifted. For the first time in my life, I was standing at a crossroads, a point where everything I had known seemed to blur into something unrecognizable. The offer Dominic had made was both a gift and a challenge. He had given me a choice, one that I had never thought I would have, but now, I was unsure if I was brave enough to take it. The days passed by in a haze as I continued my work in the mansion, trying to keep my head down, but something was different. Every time I crossed paths with Dominic, I felt his gaze on me, not with the cold detachment of someone in charge, but with a quiet curiosity that left me wondering what was going on in his mind. It made me feel both seen and vulnerable. A strange combination I wasn't sure how to handle. One evening, after finishing my duties in the kitchen, I found myself standing in the hallway, staring at the door to the study. Dominic was inside, and I couldn't help but wonder if he was thinking about our last conversation, about the role he had offered me. I had been trying to push my feelings aside, to focus on the life I had created here, but the thought of a new beginning, a different life, kept haunting me. I took a deep breath and walked toward the door. I knocked softly, my heart pounding in my chest. "Come in," came Dominic's voice from the other side, and I slowly turned the handle. As I stepped inside, I found him sitting behind his large desk, papers scattered before him. He looked up as I entered, his dark eyes locking onto mine. "Emma," he said, his tone neutral but with a hint of something I couldn't place. "What's on your mind?" I stood there for a moment, unsure of how to put my thoughts into words. "I've been thinking about your offer," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "And I don't know what to do." Dominic leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "It's not a decision you have to make right away," he said calmly. "Take your time. But I want you to know that whatever you choose, you don't have to stay in the shadows anymore." His words struck me like a lightning bolt, and I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. I had spent so long in the background, so long hiding behind the mask of professionalism and duty. The thought of stepping out into the light, of having a voice and a place in this world, was both exhilarating and terrifying. "I'm scared," I admitted, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "I've spent my whole life being invisible. I don't know if I can change that." Dominic studied me for a moment, his gaze intense, but not unkind. "You don't have to change overnight," he said softly. "You just have to take the first step, and I'll be here to help you." I looked at him, the man who had once been nothing more than a powerful figure in the shadows of my life, and for the first time, I saw him differently. He wasn't just the Mafia boss. He was a man who cared, who saw more than just the roles we played. And that was something I hadn't expected. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice breaking slightly. He nodded, his expression softening. "You don't need to thank me," he said quietly. "But I need you to understand that you matter. You always have." It was a simple statement, but it hit me like a wave. I had spent so long feeling like I didn't matter, like I was just another face in the crowd, just another servant in his house. But now, Dominic was telling me that I was more than that I was important. "I don't know if I'm ready," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "But I want to try." He smiled faintly, the first real smile I had seen from him in days. "That's all I'm asking," he said, his voice gentle. "Take your time, Emma. We all have our own pace." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a choice, a chance to make something of myself outside of the walls I had built around me. The days that followed were a blur. I tried to focus on my work, but my mind kept drifting back to the conversation I had with Dominic. I couldn't stop thinking about the possibilities that lay ahead, the opportunities one had never thought possible. It was terrifying, but it was also thrilling. The mansion felt different now. The walls didn't feel as cold, the silence wasn't as oppressive. I was no longer just a maid in the shadows. I was someone who had a voice, someone who had a choice. And that was the most empowering feeling I had ever experienced. As I continued my work in the mansion, I found myself starting to take small steps, testing the waters. I would speak up more in conversations, ask for what I needed, and take moments for myself when I could. It wasn't easy, but I was learning to be seen. I was learning to be more than just the quiet maid who worked behind the scenes. And as the days went by, I began to realize that I wasn't just changing my role in the mansion. I was changing my life. But even as I embraced the new path that lay before me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something more was about to happen. Something that would change everything once again. I had spent the last few days trying to process everything Dominic had said to me. His words echoed in my mind, haunting and encouraging all at once. "You matter. You deserve more than just a job." I hadn't realized how much I longed for someone to see me that way, to tell me that I had value beyond the role I played in this mansion. It was strange, and it made me uncomfortable, but at the same time, it lit something inside me that I had buried for far too long. I had always been content with the shadows, with the quiet life of a servant, never demanding attention or acknowledgement. But now, I was being offered something different, something unknown, and the uncertainty of it all was both thrilling and terrifying. Every day since Dominic's offer, I found myself struggling to adjust to this new way of being. I was trying to speak up more, asking for what I needed, asserting myself in small ways. But there was always a voice in my head that told me to be careful, to remember my place. The mansion felt different now. The grand hallways, the pristine marble floors, the polished wooden doors, they all felt less intimidating, less cold. Or maybe it wasn't the mansion that had changed, but me. I had stopped seeing myself as just a maid, just another invisible part of the machinery of the household. I had become someone who could step into the light, someone who had a voice. But it wasn't easy. Every day was a battle between the part of me that was ready to step forward and the part of me that was still terrified of being seen, of being vulnerable. It wasn't until one evening, as I was walking through the hallway, that I realized how much I had changed. I had just finished my duties for the day and was heading toward the staff quarters when I saw Dominic standing by the door to his study. His eyes met mine, and for a brief moment, everything around us seemed to fall away. He wasn't the Mafia boss in that moment. He was just a man, and I was just a woman standing in front of him. "Emma," he said, his voice calm, almost too calm. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" My heart skipped a beat. I had been expecting something like this, but still, hearing him say it felt like a shock to my system. I nodded, trying to steady my breath as I followed him into the study. The room was familiar, with its dark wood paneling and heavy velvet curtains, but tonight it felt different. Tonight, the air between us felt thick with unspoken words, like there was something about to change. Dominic closed the door behind me and turned to face me, his expression serious. "I've been thinking a lot about you," he began, his voice softer than usual. "About everything you've been going through. I know I've offered you a chance, but I want you to know that I'm not rushing you. You take all the time you need." I felt my heart thud in my chest. There was something in his eyes now, a sincerity, a tenderness, that made me feel exposed, vulnerable. It was the first time I had seen him like this. It was as if the walls he had built around himself had come down, just as mine had. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words caught in my throat. I wasn't sure what to say. I wasn't even sure what I wanted anymore. "It's just hard," I said finally, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "I've spent so long hiding, pretending that everything is fine, that I don't need anything, that I don't want anything. But now, you're giving me a choice. And it's scary." Dominic stepped closer, his eyes never leaving mine. "You don't have to be afraid, Emma," he said gently. "This is your life. You deserve to live it on your own terms. I'm offering you a chance, but the decision is yours." I swallowed hard, trying to wrap my mind around what he was offering. He was right. It was my life, and I had spent so long letting it slip by without ever truly living it. "I don't know if I can do it," I admitted, my voice trembling. "I've always been in the background. I've always kept my head down, stayed quiet, and never asked for anything. I don't know how to be anything else." Dominic's expression softened, and he placed a hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to change who you are, Emma," he said, his voice firm yet kind. "You don't have to become someone else to take this chance. You just have to be the best version of yourself." His words struck something deep inside me. I had spent so long pretending to be something I wasn't, trying to blend in, trying to disappear. But now, standing in front of him, I realized that I didn't have to be invisible anymore. I didn't have to stay in the shadows. "I'm scared," I confessed, the weight of the truth finally breaking free. "I'm scared of what's next, of what it means to have a voice, to be seen. I've never had that before." Dominic's hand squeezed my shoulder gently. "That's okay," he said softly. "It's okay to be scared. But you don't have to do it alone. I'm here, and I believe in you." The words he spoke were simple, but they were everything I needed to hear. For the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't alone. For the first time, I felt like I mattered. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. Maybe it was time. Maybe it was time to take that first step into the unknown. The fear was still there, but it no longer felt suffocating. It was a part of the journey, and for once, I was ready to face it. "Okay," I whispered, my voice shaky but determined. I'm ready. Dominic gave me a small smile, one that made my heart flutter. Good, he said, his voice warm. Then let's take that first step together. I didn't know where this journey would lead, but for the first time, I felt like I was on the right path. And for the first time, I wasn't alone. I woke up the next morning with a sense of clarity that I hadn't felt in years. The previous night's conversation with Dominic had left an impression on me, one that I couldn't shake. It wasn't just about the offer he made, but the way he made me feel, seen, valued, important. It was strange, this shift in how I saw myself. For so long, I had accepted being invisible, a mere shadow in the grand scheme of things. But now, for the first time in my life, I realized that I didn't have to stay in that shadow. The fear I had carried for so long was still there, lurking in the background, but it didn't feel as overwhelming anymore. It was something I could face, something I could overcome, if I was willing to take that first step. I walked through the mansion that morning, doing my usual duties, but the world felt different. The cold, polished floors seemed warmer beneath my feet. The high ceilings didn't feel as imposing, and the ornate furniture seemed to soften around me. It was as if the house itself was no longer a prison, but a place where I had a voice. A place where I had a choice. I made my way to the kitchen, where I found the staff preparing breakfast. As usual, they moved quickly and efficiently, their eyes never meeting mine, as though I were a part of the furniture rather than a person. But today, something inside me pushed back against that. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was part of the world around me. I smiled and greeted the others, and for the first time, they looked back. It was a small thing, a simple greeting, but it felt like a victory. I wasn't just the maid anymore. I was someone who mattered. After breakfast, I found myself walking to Dominic's office. I hadn't planned it, but it felt like the right thing to do. I needed to talk to him. I wasn't sure about everything yet, but I knew I had to start somewhere. I knocked on the door and heard his voice calling me in. I entered, feeling a mixture of nervousness and excitement. He was sitting behind his desk, as usual, but today there was something different about him. His posture was more relaxed, his expression open, as though he was waiting for me. "Emma," he said, looking up from the papers on his desk. "How are you today?" His voice was calm, but there was a warmth in it that made my heart flutter. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "I'm better," I said, the words coming more easily than I expected. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about what you offered me." Dominic nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. "I'm glad to hear that. It's not an easy decision, I know." I nodded, my hands resting at my sides, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't know if I'm ready for everything you're offering, but I want to try. I want to take that first step." He smiled, a small, encouraging smile that made me feel like I was on the right path. "That's all I ask," he said softly. "Take your time. You don't have to rush. But when you're ready, I'll be here." His words were exactly what I needed to hear. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was making a choice, not just following a path that had been laid out for me. I was choosing my own future. I wasn't sure what it would look like or where it would take me, but I knew that it was mine to shape. As I left Dominic's office, I felt a sense of determination I hadn't known I had. I had taken the first step, and that step, however small it seemed, was everything. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I didn't have to hide in the shadows anymore. The next few days were a blur of small changes. I spoke up more at work, making my presence known in ways I never had before. I took on more responsibility, and while there were still moments of doubt and fear, I was no longer content to simply fade into the background. I was part of this world now, and I was going to make sure my voice was heard. The mansion, once a place of silence and isolation, began to feel more like home. It was still big, still imposing, but it wasn't as cold as it used to be. And it wasn't just because of the work I was doing. It was because I had started to claim my place in it. A few days later, Dominic invited me to dinner. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a quiet meal in the dining room, but it felt like a significant moment. When I arrived, he was already seated at the table, his usual air of authority softened by the casual setting. "Please sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. As I took my seat, I couldn't help but feel a sense of connection between us, something that had grown in the days since our last conversation. "How have you been?" he asked, his voice calm, but with an underlying sincerity that made me feel comfortable. "I've been good," I replied, smiling a little. Different, but good. Dominic nodded, his gaze thoughtful. I'm glad to hear that. Change isn't always easy, but it's worth it. We ate in silence for a while. The food delicious, but secondary to the quiet companionship we shared. It was in these quiet moments that I felt the most alive, the most seen. As the meal came to an end, Dominic stood, pushing his chair back with a soft scrape. I'm proud of you, Emma, he said, his voice quieter now, as though he were sharing something personal. You've taken that first step, and I believe you'll keep going. I looked up at him, the weight of his words sinking in. Thank you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I wasn't sure where this journey would lead, but I knew one thing for certain. It was mine to walk. And for the first time, I was ready to walk it with my head held high. I had never imagined that my life could change so completely in such a short amount of time. It felt like I was living in a dream, one where I was no longer invisible, no longer just a background figure in the mansion. Every day felt like a step forward, but it also brought new challenges. The more I asserted myself, the more I realized how much I had been holding back, how much I had been denying myself. Dominic had given me a chance, and with it came a responsibility, to be more than just the maid, more than just someone who stayed in the shadows. But the fear that came with that responsibility was something I wasn't prepared for. I wasn't used to being seen. I wasn't used to being noticed in any other way than as a servant, a piece of furniture, something to be moved around when needed. But as the days passed, I started to feel different. I wasn't sure what was happening, but it was as if the mansion itself was changing with me. The coldness that once defined it, that made it feel like a prison, was slowly giving way to something warmer, something that felt like possibility. One afternoon, as I was cleaning the library, I overheard a conversation in the hallway. It was Dominic's voice, but he wasn't speaking to me. He was speaking to someone else, someone who had arrived at the mansion unexpectedly. I caught snippets of the conversation as I dusted the shelves, trying to keep my presence unnoticed. From what I could gather, the conversation was about business, about deals and moves in the underworld that Dominic had been a part of for years. But then, something shifted in his tone. The conversation turned personal, and I couldn't help but listen in, curious. I didn't expect her to have such an impact, Dominic said, his voice low and measured. I thought it would be just another moment of offering a chance. But Emma, she's different. She's not like anyone I've known. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. He was talking about me. I wasn't sure how to feel about it. Was he speaking with admiration, or was it just the weight of the situation, the fact that he had made an offer that he couldn't take back? I couldn't be sure. You've been holding back, the other person replied, his voice unfamiliar. She's not going to be satisfied with staying in the shadows forever. Dominic's response was a slow exhale. I know, he said quietly. That's what scares me. The word struck me like a punch to the gut. He was scared of me, of what I could become, of what I might do with the freedom he had offered me. I didn't know what to make of it, but I couldn't ignore the unease it caused. The fear that I had been trying to push away suddenly came rushing back. I had never wanted to be a burden, never wanted to cause problems, but Dominic's words made me realize how much weight I had placed on his shoulders without even knowing it. I wasn't just changing my life. I was changing his too. The realization hit me hard. The next few days felt like a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about that conversation, about Dominic's words. I had never seen him as someone who was vulnerable, someone who could be afraid. He was always the powerful, untouchable Mafia boss, the one who controlled everything around him. But hearing him admit his fear made me wonder what that really meant. Did he truly see me as someone who could change everything? Or was it just a temporary moment, something he would soon regret? I couldn't tell. But I knew one thing for sure. I had to find out for myself. The following week, as I was walking through the mansion, I found myself standing outside Dominic's office. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear him talking inside. I paused, unsure whether I should interrupt or just leave him to his business. But then, I heard my name. Emma, Dominic's voice said, louder now, as if he were speaking to someone else. She's more than just a maid. She's more than I thought. I don't know how to handle it, but I can't ignore it anymore. My heart skipped a beat. He was talking about me again, and this time, I wasn't sure if it was in a way that made me feel seen or if it was just a burden he didn't want. I stood there for a moment, my hand resting on the doorknob, debating whether I should step inside. Finally, I took a deep breath and opened the door. Dominic looked up from his desk, surprised to see me. He quickly stood, as if he hadn't expected me to overhear anything. But I wasn't here to confront him about the conversation. I was here to make a decision, to take control of my own life. Dominic, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. I've been thinking a lot about everything. About what you said, and about what you've offered me. He nodded, his expression neutral, but I could see a hint of something else in his eyes. It was like he was waiting for me to make the first move, to take the first step toward something different. I'm ready, I said, my voice stronger now, more certain. I don't know what's going to happen, but I can't keep hiding anymore. I can't keep staying in the background. For a moment, Dominic didn't say anything. He just stood there, looking at me as though he was trying to figure out what had changed. But then, he smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. I knew you would be, he said, his voice warm. You don't have to do this alone, Emma. Whatever comes next, we'll figure it out together. And in that moment, everything shifted. I had stepped out of the shadows, not just for myself, but for both of us. And for the first time in my life, I realized that I wasn't just part of his world. I had the power to shape my own. I stood there, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. Dominic's words, his steady support, had given me the strength to take that first step, but I knew it wasn't going to be easy. The shadows of my past still lingered, threatening to pull me back, to keep me hidden. But something had shifted within me, something stronger than fear. For the first time, I was ready to face what came next. I had chosen to take control of my life, to step out of the background and into the light. It wasn't just for me, it was for Dominic too. He had given me a chance, and I wasn't going to let that opportunity slip away. I walked through the mansion with a newfound sense of purpose, every step carrying the weight of the decision I had made. The halls, once cold and imposing, no longer felt as threatening. It was as though the house itself was responding to the change within me, the walls no longer as suffocating. As I passed by the rooms, the quiet seemed different, softer, warmer, like the mansion itself was beginning to recognize me, to see me in a way it never had before. I found myself heading toward Dominic's office, drawn by the thought of what lay ahead. I had told him I was ready, but now, standing outside his door, I wasn't sure if I was. The fear that had haunted me for so long crept back in, but it was different now. It didn't control me. I had faced it before, and I could do it again. I knocked on the door, and Dominic's voice came through. Come in. I turned the handle and stepped inside. Dominic was sitting behind his desk, as always, but there was something different in the way he looked at me today. His gaze wasn't cold, wasn't calculating. It was soft, expectant, as though he were waiting for me to take that final step. Emma, he said, his voice calm, but with a warmth that made my heart flutter. Come sit. I took a deep breath and moved to the chair across from him, the same chair I had sat in so many times before, but today, it felt different. Today, I wasn't just a maid. Today, I was someone who had a voice, who had a choice. How are you feeling? He asked, his tone casual, but the question hanging heavy in the air. I looked at him, my heart beating in my chest. I'm scared, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can do this. Dominic studied me for a moment, his eyes searching mine. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, as though considering my words carefully. It's okay to be scared, he said finally, his voice steady and reassuring. You don't have to have everything figured out right now. But what matters is that you're choosing to move forward. You're choosing to take control of your life. And that's the hardest part. His words sank in, and I realized he was right. I didn't have to have everything figured out. I didn't have to be perfect. I just had to be willing to take that first step, even if it was small. Even if it meant embracing the fear and moving through it. You've given me a chance, I said, my voice stronger now, more certain. And I'm going to take it. I'm not going to hide anymore. Dominic's expression softened, a faint smile tugging at his lips. I'm proud of you, he said quietly. You don't have to do this alone, Emma. I'm here. His words, simple as they were, filled me with a sense of calm. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was standing on the edge, about to fall. I felt like I was taking the first step onto solid ground. Thank you, I whispered, my heart swelling with gratitude. I don't know where this will take me, but I know I'm ready to find out. Dominic nodded, his smile widening slightly. That's all I needed to hear, he said. He stood then, offering his hand to me, a gesture of support and partnership. I hesitated for only a moment before taking it. The touch of his hand was warm, firm, and I felt a sense of connection between us that I hadn't felt before. It was no longer just about me serving him or being in his world. It was about us, together, facing whatever came next. I stood up, my legs a little unsteady but my heart steady and resolute. "What now?" I asked, my voice curious but determined. Dominic smiled, his eyes lighting up with something more than just leadership. "Now, we begin," he said simply. "One step at a time. And we'll take them together." As I left his office, I felt something new inside me. Something I couldn't quite put into words, but it felt like strength, like possibility. I was no longer just the maid. I was no longer hiding. I was stepping into the world, into a life that I was finally ready to claim. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I stood in the hallway outside Dominic's office, the weight of what had just transpired sinking in. The decision to take that first step had felt like stepping off a ledge, but now that I was in it, now that I was truly moving forward, something in me felt lighter, as though the burden I had carried for so long was finally beginning to lift. For the first time in years, I wasn't running away from the truth of who I was or what I wanted. I wasn't hiding in the shadows, waiting for someone else to define me. I was defining myself. As I walked back through the mansion, the familiar surroundings seemed different. The rooms didn't feel as cold or as vast as they once had. The tall, intimidating walls seemed to close in just a little bit, not as a prison, but as a space where I had a purpose, where I had a voice. It wasn't just the mansion that had changed, it was me. I had taken control, and now everything felt new. The days that followed were filled with small, but significant changes. I began taking on more responsibilities, stepping out from behind the staff, and interacting more with the other members of the household. The people who had always treated me like I was invisible were now starting to acknowledge me, to speak to me as though I mattered. It was uncomfortable at first, but it was also exhilarating. I had never realized how much I had been holding back, how much I had let myself fade into the background. But now, I was starting to step into the light. One evening, a week after my conversation with Dominic, I found myself standing in the dining room, setting the table for dinner. As usual, the staff moved around, their faces impassive, their movements efficient. But tonight, something was different. Dominic was in the room, talking to a few business associates, his voice carrying through the space. I watched him for a moment, studying his posture, the way he commanded the room with just his presence. He was the man who ran the empire, the man who controlled everything and everyone around him. But now, I saw him differently. I saw the man who had offered me a chance at something more, someone who had seen me when no one else had. As he turned and caught my eye, something passed between us. A silent understanding, perhaps, or maybe it was just the bond that had formed in the quiet moments between us. Whatever it was, it made my heart race. He nodded at me, a small, approving smile on his lips. I felt my chest tighten, but it wasn't the fear I used to feel when I saw him. It was something else, something that felt like pride, like belonging. As I finished setting the table, Dominic approached me, his gaze never leaving mine. "How are you settling in?" he asked, his voice low and casual. It was a simple question, but the weight behind it wasn't lost on me. He cared. "I'm adjusting," I said, my voice steady. "I feel like I'm finally finding my place." He nodded, his eyes softening for a moment before he turned his attention back to the man he was speaking with. The evening went on, the usual business discussions filling the air, but I couldn't help but notice how Dominic's gaze kept returning to me. It was as though he were watching me, waiting for me to prove that I was ready for whatever came next. And I was. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was walking in someone else's world, following someone else's rules. I was carving out my own path, and I was doing it with purpose. The days turned into weeks, and the changes continued. Dominic and I spoke more often, sometimes about business, sometimes about the mundane details of life in the mansion. But with each conversation, I felt myself becoming more comfortable, more at ease with him. He wasn't just the boss anymore. He was a man I could talk to, a man who respected me. It was a strange shift, one I wasn't sure how to navigate, but it felt right. One afternoon, as I was working in the garden, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, surprised to see Dominic standing there, his usual calm expression softened by something else. "You're looking more comfortable around here," he said, his voice light, but with an undercurrent of sincerity. "How are you feeling about everything?" I paused, wiping my hands on my apron as I looked at him. I'm still figuring it out, I admitted. But I think I'm finally starting to see the person I could be. Dominic smiled, his eyes glinting with something like approval. You're doing well, he said simply. I knew you had it in you. His words, those simple words of encouragement, meant more to me than I could say. I had spent so long doubting myself, so long hiding from the world. But now, I felt like I was finally stepping into my own. And it wasn't just because of the opportunity he had given me. It was because I had chosen to take it. I had chosen to face my fears and embrace the person I was becoming. Thank you, I said quietly, my voice almost a whisper. For everything. Dominic nodded, his gaze soft. You don't need to thank me, he said. I'm just giving you the chance. You're the one who's making it happen. I felt a surge of gratitude rise in me, and for the first time, I realized how much I had changed. The woman I was before, quiet, invisible, always on the sidelines, was gone. She had been replaced by someone who was standing tall, who was no longer afraid to take up space, to make her voice heard. I wasn't sure where this journey would lead, but I knew one thing. It was my journey, and I was no longer afraid to walk it. I walked through the mansion, feeling an unfamiliar sense of purpose in every step. The air seemed lighter now, not as heavy with the weight of my past, and yet, the unease that lingered in the corners of my mind hadn't completely vanished. I had chosen to step into the light, to take control of my life, but with that came an overwhelming amount of uncertainty. Would I be able to handle everything Dominic was offering me? Would I truly become the person I was meant to be, or would I fail and fall back into the shadows? The questions circled in my mind as I passed the familiar rooms, the halls that had once felt cold and distant, now feeling like a space I could claim as my own. I had changed, but I wasn't sure if the mansion or Dominic saw me the way I now saw myself. As I entered the staff quarters, I was greeted with the usual nods and polite smiles from the other staff members. They still treated me with the same distance they always had, but I didn't mind. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't need their acknowledgement to know who I was or what I had accomplished. What mattered was that I had changed my own perception of myself. The shift was small, but it was profound. Later that evening, I found myself in the dining room, helping to set the table for a formal dinner. The sounds of quiet conversation and clinking silverware filled the air as I worked, but my mind was elsewhere, contemplating everything that had happened over the past few weeks. The offer from Dominic, my acceptance, the transformation I had undergone, it was all a whirlwind of new beginnings. I had begun to think of myself as someone who had value beyond just the work I did in the mansion. As I arranged the plates, I felt a sense of pride in my work, not because of the task itself, but because I was finally able to stand tall while doing it. I no longer felt like a shadow in this place. I was starting to feel like a part of it. The door opened, and Dominic stepped inside, his presence as commanding as always, but tonight there was something softer about him. His gaze found mine almost immediately, and for a brief moment, everything around us seemed to fade away. He walked toward me, his steps slow and deliberate, until he was standing next to the table where I was finishing my preparations. You're doing well, he said, his voice low but filled with warmth. I've been watching you. I looked up at him, unsure of how to respond. His words caught me off guard. I'm just doing my job, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but I could feel the heat rise in my cheeks. Dominic's smile was small, but there was a depth to it that made my heart race. No, it's more than that, he said, his eyes softening. You're not just doing your job. You're owning it. You're owning yourself. His words, simple as they were, struck a chord deep within me. I hadn't realized how much I had been holding back, how much I had been afraid of fully embracing the woman I could be. But hearing him say it, in such a quiet, confident way, made me realize that it was possible. Thank you, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Dominic nodded, as if he understood the weight of the moment. You've come a long way, Emma, but I think you know that. I felt a lump form in my throat at his words. It was strange, hearing someone like him acknowledge me in this way. For so long, I had been nothing more than a servant in his mansion, someone to be seen but never truly noticed. But now, I was more than that. And I wasn't just changing the way I saw myself. I was changing the way others saw me too. Dominic stepped back, his gaze still locked with mine, and for a moment, it felt like time stood still. I wasn't sure what to say next. I had spent so long trying to keep my emotions hidden, afraid of what might happen if I let them show. But with Dominic, it felt different. He wasn't judging me or trying to control me. He was simply offering me the space to be myself, to take the next step. "You're ready," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, as though he were sharing a secret. I know it. I wanted to ask what he meant by that, but before I could, the sound of footsteps interrupted us. A few of the other staff members entered the room, and the moment between Dominic and me was broken. But something had shifted in that brief exchange. Something that had changed the way I saw him, and the way I saw myself. As the evening went on, the dinner progressed without incident, the conversations around the table light and casual. But I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. I had taken the first step, but I was still unsure of what the future held. Would I continue down this path, or would I retreat back into the shadows, afraid to fully embrace the person I had become? As I cleared the plates from the table, I looked around at the familiar faces of the other staff members. I knew that nothing was truly different yet. I still had to prove myself, to take the next steps in this new life I was forging. But for the first time, I felt ready. I felt like I was no longer standing on the sidelines. I was a part of something bigger than myself. And that was the most empowering feeling I had ever known. I stood at the edge of the balcony, the cool evening breeze brushing against my skin as I gazed out over the sprawling estate. The view was as beautiful as it had always been, but tonight, it felt different. Tonight, it felt like I was seeing the world for the first time, through new eyes, a new perspective that had been unlocked over the past few weeks. I had come so far from the woman I had been when I first stepped into this mansion. Timid, unsure, invisible. But now, I was someone different. Someone who had learned to embrace her own worth, who had found her voice. The fear I had felt in the beginning still lingered, but it no longer controlled me. I had faced it, and I had stepped beyond it. I had taken control of my life, my future. I had chosen to step into the light. Dominic's presence in my life had been the catalyst for this change, but it wasn't just about him. It was about me, about the choices I had made, the strength I had discovered within myself. It had all started with a simple act of kindness, one that had made me feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in my life. And now, as I stood here, in the quiet of the night, I realized just how much that moment had changed everything. The doors to the mansion behind me opened, and I turned to see Dominic walking toward me, his tall figure illuminated by the soft glow of the lights inside. He moved with the same confidence, the same authority, but there was something in the way he looked at me now, something softer. It wasn't just about business anymore. It wasn't about the roles we played in this world. It was about us. "I see you," he said, his voice low but steady. "Not just as a part of this place, but as someone who matters. I've always seen that in you." His words hit me in a way I wasn't expecting. I had known, deep down, that there was something different about what had developed between us, but hearing him say it out loud, hearing him acknowledge it, made everything feel real. "I've never felt this way before," I admitted, my voice trembling slightly. "Like I'm not just here to serve, but that I have a purpose. That I'm more than just a maid." Dominic stepped closer, his expression softening. "You've always had a purpose, Emma. I'm just glad you're beginning to see it. You're not just someone's servant, someone's tool. You're someone with dreams, with ambitions. And I've always believed you had it in you to achieve them." The weight of his words settled in my chest, and for a moment, I could hardly breathe. It was more than just validation. It was a promise, a commitment that I wasn't alone in this. That whatever I chose to do next, I wouldn't have to do it by myself. I wasn't sure where this journey would take me. I wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, or the next day, or the next year. But I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer afraid to walk that path. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice shaky with emotion. "For seeing me. For helping me find myself." Dominic's hand reached out, gently resting on my shoulder, a gesture that felt both comforting and empowering. "You don't need to thank me," he said quietly. "You did the hard part. You chose to take control. You chose to step into the light." As he spoke, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The fear that had once held me captive, that had kept me in the shadows, no longer had a hold on me. I was free to be myself, free to pursue whatever future I chose. And for the first time in my life, I realized that I was worthy of that freedom. The mansion behind me, the world I had once been so afraid to step into. no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a place where I belonged, where I could shape my own destiny. The choice was mine. The future was mine. And as Dominic stood beside me, his presence a steady support, I knew that whatever came next, I was ready. Together, we could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, we could build something that went beyond the roles we had been given, beyond the expectations that had been placed on us. We could build something real. The night stretched out before us, full of possibilities, full of promise. And as I looked at Dominic, I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what the future held. I was ready to take it on, to shape it into something I could call my own. Immerse yourself in a captivating tale of transformation and self-discovery with this compelling romance story. Follow Emma, a woman who spent her life hidden in the shadows, as she finds the strength to step into the light. Her journey is filled with unexpected moments of kindness and vulnerability, turning her world upside down. This romance story takes you through her evolving relationship with Dominic, a powerful figure who sees beyond her position and offers her a chance to redefine herself. As Emma starts to embrace her newfound sense of worth, she begins to understand that she is more than just a maid in a mansion. She is a woman with dreams and ambitions. Their connection grows deeper, and what started as a professional relationship becomes something much more meaningful. This romance story is a journey of not only finding love, but also finding the courage to live authentically. Emma's fears and doubts are met with gentle encouragement, and with each step she takes, she becomes stronger and more confident. The mansion that once felt like a prison transforms into a place of opportunity, as Emma steps forward to claim her own future. In this tale of unexpected romance, you'll discover how the power of love and self-belief can change everything. This romance story is a reminder that even in the most uncertain moments, there is always a path to happiness if you choose to walk it. With Dominic's unwavering support, Emma finds herself standing at the threshold of a new life, ready to embrace the possibilities of tomorrow. Whether you're a fan of dramatic romance stories or simply enjoy heartfelt journeys of personal growth, this story will leave you inspired and hopeful.